administrators have all gone on record to say Eric and Lyle have been model people while incarcerated. They have run several programs to mentor inmates who they knew would see the freedom that they wouldn't. That is remarkable. Third, plans for the future. The parole board will look at their plans for the future. And Eric and Lyle have already done so much tangible good work while incarcerated for society. If released, they will continue to build on the work they've started. They'll look at institutional behavior. Everything I've just touched on shows that they have gone above and beyond to not only function within the walls of a prison, but improve the culture of that facility through their work. They have improved the community that surrounds them. And then they'll look at their age. You know, Eric and Lyle are both in their 50s. We all are. They have spent the majority of their lives incarcerated. And incredibly, they've managed to build meaningful lives year after year, program after program. And then they'll look at their lack of criminal history. They don't have a prior criminal record outside of making a horrific decision as a direct result of the abuse they endured for over a decade. The parole board must also factor in the fact that Eric and Lyle were still kids at the time of their actions. So Lyle was 21 and Eric was 18 at the time of the killings. There is overwhelming scientific research that proves the human brain, especially areas that regulate impulse control and decision-making, is not fully developed until someone is in their mid-20s. As the mother of a 17 and 18-year-old boys, I can attest to that as well. Both the legislature and the courts have recognized that youthful offenders have diminished moral culpability and a greater capacity for rehabilitation based on widely accepted scientific evidence on adolescent brain development. They must take that into consideration. I'll pass it over to Tamara.
Thanks, Anna Maria. I just really want to go over everything that they have done since they were convicted in 1996. I think it's incredibly important to stress that Eric and Lyle went into prison, into incarceration during their formative years and have, for all intents and purposes, created careers for themselves while they have been incarcerated. And that is incredibly moving for all of us. While incarcerated, Eric has created and led several impactful programs, which I will detail now. The Life Care and Hospice Connections Program, which is an ADA awareness and support group assisting disabled and elderly inmates while educating others about the challenges faced by less able peers. The Victim Impact and Empathy Program, or VIVE, is a workshop fostering understanding and empathy by incorporating victim impact elements from the life care and hospice curriculum. Alternatives to Violence Project, AVP, is a series of workshops promoting nonviolent conflict resolution, self-awareness, empathy, and community building. The Starlight Peace Project is a program capturing images of peace in areas affected by violence. It has successfully coordinated 30 event leaders and engaged over 150 participants. Eric has also led 12-step and meditation classes. This combines the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous with mindfulness, meditation, and meditation practices. Insight meditation workshops, which introduces inmates to the physical, emotional, and spiritual benefits of mindfulness meditation. Eric has received dozens of commendations from prison supervisors for his leadership, mentorship, and his service to fellow inmates, which are all detailed in the People's Motion requesting 1172.1, recall of sentence and resentencing hearing. And with that, I will let Anne Maria go into Lyle's details of rehabilitation.
Thanks, Tamara. Lyle has also made significant contributions, creating and leading impactful programs. The Adverse Childhood Experience in Rehabilitation, ACER program, is a program helping offenders explore their childhood experiences and impact and impact and contributions to criminal behavior. The Green Space Project spearheaded the beautification of prison spaces through murals and landscaping, reducing recidivism by normalizing the prison environment. Over 100 inmates participated, marking the first time prison administration entrusted an inmate to lead such a redesign. The Rehabilitation through Beautification Project, RTB, a volunteer effort supporting the Green Space Project through mural painting and landscaping. The Youth LWAP Ally, a mentoring group for youth offenders with life without parole sentences, guiding others in their rehabilitation journeys. And the Wire Bulletin, an inmate advisory bulletin fostering communication between the Inmate Advisory Council to the wider inmate population. Their achievements, both Eric and Lyle, would be inspiring for anyone, but as incarcerated individuals, they are truly amazing. And now I want to talk about the narratives painted by the district attorney at the press conference, which closely illustrated those presented at the first trial. First, no one is disputing the crime, not even Eric and Lyle. All we are asking for is the DA to consider their prison record as a whole, their rehabilitation, the remorse they have expressed, and the new evidence the habeas petition introduces, which corroborates Eric and Lyle's story. While we are not surprised that the district attorney took the stance that he did with the habeas petition, we were surprised to see it litigated the way that it was in the press, with the press. The danger of presenting that 1990s narrative under today's laws and modern understanding of trauma is that it ignores how far we have come in recognizing the long-term effects of abuse and the systemic barriers that keep victims silent. Today, we understand that trauma rewires the brain and shapes a person's actions and decisions in ways that were not fully appreciated decades ago. California law has evolved to reflect this, acknowledging that childhood abuse profoundly impacts behavior and should be a critical factor in the justice system. It's not just about speaking out, because for many survivors, that is an impossible task. The very act of acknowledging their trauma can take years, sometimes a lifetime. The expectation that victims should have immediately disclosed their abuse ignores the reality of trauma. Many survivors struggle with self-blame, fear, and shame, all of which are exacerbated by a system that has historically dismissed their voices. While we acknowledge that the district attorney has a duty to prosecute cases based on the law, we must ask, is he applying the law as it exists today with a modern trauma-informed understanding? Or is he relying on an outdated, harmful framework that has since been rejected? While we don't want to focus too much more on his comments on the habeas petition, we do want to take a moment and address his comments on the letter Eric sent to Andy and Roy Rosello's testimony. Andy received the letter in December of 1988. The time for proving the authenticity of the letter will be discussed in court. But what we can say now is that Andy was a teenage boy at the time. He was 15, by the way. Actually, I think he was still 14. With all of the mounds of evidence presented in the first trial, it's only natural for a teenage boy to not realize he is sitting on critical evidence. Andy wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't even an adult. To pose the question now, decades later after he passed, of why wasn't the letter submitted back then, is like asking a teenager who got an offender bender, why didn't you call the police to file a report? Because a teenager doesn't know any better. He didn't realize how vital that letter would be to the case. Second, he indicated that Roy Rosello's testimony doesn't meet the habeas standards because he didn't come forward sooner. The whole point of a habeas petition is to include new evidence, and Roy coming out to share his story in his own time is new evidence. Again, how many victims have stayed silent because of the systems that are designed to silence and dismiss them? Let's bring the case back to 2025. Tamara.
Thanks again. It is also critically relevant to discuss the fact that California law increasingly acknowledges that youthfulness impacts decision-making, often leading young people to have irrationally or dishonestly in stressful and traumatic circumstances. Such youthful missteps should not overshadow or negate subsequent truthful disclosures. We, including California state law and every clinical psychologist, now understand that trauma, especially at a young age, can rewire someone's brain. The trauma, like Eric and Lyle endured, cripples victims' ability to think rationally before, during, and after taking action. Today, there is overwhelming evidence of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which show that early exposure to severe abuse fundamentally alters a person's mental and emotional behavior. If Eric and Lyle were tried today, California law would have compelled Hochman's office to consider the abuse that molded every fiber of their being. But Eric and Lyle are not kids anymore. They are grown men who have transformed their lives while incarcerated. We wish the DA had spoken about the programs that they have spearheaded, the support groups that they have started, the higher learning that they have pursued, and the numerous other inmates that they have inspired. Through their work, Eric and Lyle have shown who they really are, not who Jose and Kitty made them. They did all of this while fully knowing it may not mean a release for them, but a difference for those with whom they have served time. Eric and Lyle have dedicated themselves to extensive rehabilitation, education, and service during their incarceration, earning widespread admiration from peers and prison staff. And it's so important to emphasize that all of these actions and rehabilitation activities that they have completed were all done without any hope of being released. And then with that, I'll let Anna Maria talk about more growth and leadership.
I need to unmute myself. Eric and Lyle's remarkable growth, leadership, and rehabilitation efforts underscore their readiness to lead meaningful and productive lives outside of prison. Let's keep focusing on this. For our family, it has been 3 painful decades. We have been forced to live through the trauma every day since August 20th, 1989. We have become victims in this process. We have been laughed at, ridiculed, and forced to relive the pain over and over again. We ask that people visit our coalition page at justiceforericandlyle.org and sign the petition that's there. Thank you so much for your time. We'll open it up for questions.
Again, as a reminder, please either raise your hand or submit your question to in the Q&A box that is at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer your questions. 1 second. Tim, you have the floor.
Great, just unmuted. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So thank you very much for doing this. I was wondering if each of you could reflect a little
Tim,
more.
you're actually a little muffled.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. I was wondering if each of you could reflect a little bit on their evolution in prison. And what I'm trying to get at is, was there like a specific turning point for each where they were at a crossroads and they decided to go in the direction of trying to turn their lives around? Because I imagine they didn't walk in the first day of their sentence and they're doing all these wonderful things. So I was wondering, was there a crossroads or a turning point where they went in that direction? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Uh, I'll take this first. I don't know that I can put a date. I can timestamp that. For sure, Tim, you're right that there was those early years in level 4 maximum security uh, were rough. Were rough for them. Their experiences were rough. They were finding themselves as adults. Never mind, I mean, they were adolescents when they went into prison, so that was a tough evolution for them. I can tell you that I remember a moment in 2006, so this is now almost 20 years ago, when I was communicating with Lyle, and he sent me a letter that I will never forget because it felt different. It felt he said, and this is sort of burned in my memory, so I know it by heart. And he said, I need you to understand that I recognize my actions are your personal tragedy, and that I know I can never take it back, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it better. And it was so stunning to me. I had seen him growing, but it was for me, it marked like this was a man who was taking complete ownership, complete accountability. And it's really been a beautiful thing to see their journeys.
I think just to add to that, in conversations with Eric, it's been not, to your same point, that wasn't necessarily one date. It was the result of a culmination of experiences and the witnessing of some very violent interactions within the prison system. And Eric, they made a very conscious decision to understand that he had to make the most of where he was, and made some decisions based on what he was seeing around him, and whether it was regarding poor prison conditions or poor treatment of inmates, he really wanted to work towards how can I create a better place, not just for myself where I can exist, but how can I also affect those positively with those around me.
Thank you both. I'm going to call on Matt next. Matt, you have the floor.
Hi, folks. Thanks for taking this, and thank you for doing this press conference. I would just like to hear your reactions to Gavin Newsom's announcement yesterday that he is setting up this risk assessment investigation into whether the brothers would pose a risk if they were released, because in many ways that circumvents LADA Nathan Hochman's decision on resentencing. I mean, almost effectively it sets resentencing in motion. And I wanted to get your impressions when you first heard that news.
I'll take this. I was thrilled. First of all, I had a meeting with some of the members of the governor's office on Monday, where I was told, and it was thrilling. Although it was the beginning of the meeting was, we're not granting clemency, so keep your expectations in check. I was like, okay. But we are taking this step, and we are providing risk assessment. And it was, there were definitely some caveats, like there are no guarantees. So remember that, this is not a guaranteed process. This is a very rigorous process that we are going to go through, because it is very important to California that they have a low recidivism rate. So they will be doing a very rigorous and full process with it. But this is huge. I mean, this is huge. And I cannot thank Governor Newsom enough for stepping in and initiating this process. We as a family, we understand that this is not without professional risk for him. So for him to step in and say, okay, let's actually find out if this is doable. Let's do a risk analysis, and then we can move forward. It's a huge relief. It's a huge relief to us.
Anna Marie, I have to ask you, can you take us into that room in that moment? Were there audible gasps? Were people, sort of like high-fiving? What was that mood
Well,
like, and how did you and the people with you react?
well, it was a very small group of people, like 3 people. So, and it was virtual. So I would have been high-fiving the air. And so I couldn't be high-fiving. I certainly gasped in relief. And it was that was great news. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Veronica, I'm gonna call on you next.
Hi there, can you hear me okay? Thank you so much for calling on me. So I'm curious about the relationship that you have with District Attorney Nathan Hochman, seemingly very different than the relationship that you had with the former DA George Gascon. Can you comment on the decision to not recommend a retrial? Have you spoken with him? If not, do you have a message for Nathan Hochman?
Joe, the relationship is absolutely different. Gascon seemed much more open to modern thought processes of, where is the law today? What does compassionate look like? And what does trauma-informed practice look like? Very honestly, what we heard from the LADA's office the other day felt very disparaging. It felt like a continuation of the narrative from 1989. And very honestly, it was very frustrating. There have been so many developments that could have been brought into focus. And it was incredibly disappointing to hear that there was no mention of the rehabilitation, no mention of the positive contributions that Eric and Lyle have made to the prison system. And I say system because they have been in multiple facilities, each of them. So it's really important to recognize that and to know that they have had so many recognitions and commendations from the officers, and that went unnoticed by him, or at least he made it seem that way. So it was very, very disappointing in my honest opinion. So Anna Marie, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, first of all, we, with the last administration, we worked with Brock and Nancy, were the ones who headed up that resentencing group, and that they were tremendous. They were really supportive, and they were very well informed about trauma. I think the press conference with the district attorney last Friday it felt extra hurtful because it was only a few weeks ago that dozens of us sat in his office and described to him the horror of being in this victim's family, with 35 years of being re-traumatized over and over and over. With my 85-year-old mother with cancer sitting 10 feet away from him, literally sobbing in front of him. And then to see him decide to go make a press conference that didn't have to be a press conference, and just in gruesome detail and even a little bit embellished. There were details that weren't even accurate as far as the original crime scene. So that felt really hurtful to a lot of us. And I do want to say that when I spoke with my cousins, it was very afterwards. They, didn't have a chance to see that live, but their biggest concern was that they had heard about it and how were we doing, because they knew that that would have been gut wrenching for us, and it was. So that's my reaction.
And I just, to piggyback on what Anna Maria said, Eric had just said, we need you strong. And they both really, they mirrored our frustration, but they also said, let it go. We need to focus on moving forward. And so that is our focus.
Thank you. Hannah, you now have the floor. Hannah, if you still have a question, I think you should be unmuted.
Sorry, actually, it's Natalie Morales. I just wanted to follow up on that. You talked about the emotions that Eric and Lyle sort of conveyed in that moment. I'm wondering if you can give us a little more detail as to how they're doing now. Of course, following Friday's news conference from Hochman to then the turn of events yesterday with the governor announcing this risk assessment.
Cautious optimism, I think is really the way to say it. Also, it's been a real learning process for us as a family and for them too, because this is a new process that that the governor is using in California. So they, when we talk about parole boards and going to parole, they have lots of experience with other inmates, seeing them go through that process, understanding what that's about, what it looks like, getting turned down, that type of thing. So they have a really good, clear grasp on that. And so this is a little bit of a newer process, this risk assessment being done through the parole board initiated by the governor. Oh, excuse me. So I think that they are cautiously optimistic, but we're all sort of still trying to figure that out.
And then just adding to that, one of the things that they are also very aware of is that, and they try to just follow in the lines of caution, they are the first life without parole prisoners on this path. So when we look at any advancements or developments, it's definitely with hope, but also understanding that there are no promises.
Thank you. And I'm going to call on Emily. If you still have a question, you have the floor.
Hi, Emily Valdez here. So there are two remaining options. Well, actually three still, but two more likely remaining options. One would be the resentencing. The other would be the clemency from the governor. How confident, which path do you think is the most likely, and how confident are you that they actually will be released under one of these?
I don't feel qualified to answer that question. I feel like that's a legal team question for me. I don't know what's more likely. I just hope something. That's it.
Agreed. I feel the same. It's I wouldn't even know where to start with that other than we're just hopeful, and to know that we're now having a clear, direct response from Newsom is just, I think, beyond our expectation at this point. So knowing that there is a timeline that has been started by his initiation of this investigation, we're just holding on to that hope and moving forward as we can.
And do you know if the governor's investigation will be done by the time their next court hearing on March 20th?
That I don't know. I know that they have 90 days, but we have not been given any more information than just knowing that it's been initiated.
Okay, and just for clarification, can you each clarify your relation to Lyle and Eric for me?
Sure, I'm a first cousin. So Jose was my mother's brother.
And I am a second cousin. My mother is Karen Vandermolen, which has been interviewed multiple times, but then my grandmother is Joan. So
Jamie, you're up next. You have the floor.
Hi. So, previously, you guys had expressed concerns about conflicts of interest within the DA's office. And earlier you mentioned Nancy and Brock, who, filed, were going to file that lawsuit against DA's office for discrimination, as well as Milton's lawyer, I think, being hired into the office. Are those still concerns for you guys? Are you doing anything about it? Still calling on someone else to take over the investigation, or what's the status on that?
Those were certainly concerns of ours, but we're not taking any sort of formal steps regarding that. That's one of the reasons we are just so thrilled that Governor Newsom decided to step in and initiate this process himself. We're super, super grateful.
Thank you.
And we're going to do one last question. Edgar, you're going to have the floor.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Edgar Munoz. Have you thought of the possibility that if the verdict is not in your favor and Eric and Lyle continue in prison? And Ana Maria, do you speak Spanish? My newscast is in Spanish.
Muy bien. Yeah. Lo comprendo perfectamente, pero no lo hablo muy bien.
Okay, in English is good.
So the possibility that it doesn't go our way, that's a possibility. We would be foolish if we did not recognize that, understand that, and emotionally prepare for that. That's a real possibility. I hope not. Based on what we communicated today, I think it's quite clear that Lyle and Eric really do meet the standard for this process. So I'm grateful that it's going to be a non-political process. I'm grateful that it's going to be a transparent process, that everybody will have a chance to see the results. But you're right. You're right. There are no guarantees. That was also communicated very clearly from the governor's office. So we'll just have to see the investigation, how it goes, and the results.
Thank you.
And that brings our time to an end. Thank you everyone so much for joining. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me and I'll get back to you. Bye everyone.